Thank you for signing up to join this call. It's a really exciting moment for Boscombe West. The Labour government have provided £20 million for the community to be put in the driving seat and to decide how to spend that funding over 10 years. And we want as much as possible to support local people to take decisions about applying for the independent board and applying to be the independent chair. And these are the two roles that are going to be critical for making the investments. And so we thought, what better way to do that than to talk to another MP, Lizzi Collinge, who is with me right now, about how they've done that in her own constituency of Morecambe and Lunesdale. Obviously, there are differences between Bournemouth East and Morecambe and Lunesdale, but just how you get going and how you can start thinking about involving the community. Lizzie's done some fantastic work, and I think it could be really useful for us in Boscombe West to hear a bit about that. As we're letting more people in, I'm going to just start with the slide deck. In my best style of COVID, I'm going to be asking David, who's our moderator, to move slides forward. So let's start with next slide, please, David. So broadly speaking, we're going to be covering off four parts to the call. We're going to be taking a look at what is Pride in Place, what is this government programme. We're going to be looking at how it actually works. So what are the mechanics of spending the funding and how are the communities who are going to benefit from the investment engaged. Then we're going to hear from Lizzie about how things have been done in her constituency. And then lastly, the hope is that you will be already very excited to apply for the independent chair role or the independent board role. But by the end of it, I will be astonished and hurt if you do not, in fact, feel that you should put yourself forward straight away. Next slide, please. So Pride in Place is a Labour government programme. It's in total nearly £6 billion worth of investment that's supporting 400 neighbourhoods up and down the country. Each neighbourhood gets £20 million over a decade. And the intention for the funding is that it supports projects, so physical, tangible change, but also the cost of managing and delivering those, because it's not enough just to give money to a new theatre or a revamped community centre. It's actually important that you've got somebody who can physically move things on and work in partnership and engage the community. Next slide, please. The whole ethos of Pride in Place is, to my mind, really important. Everyone up and down the country is obviously excited to get £20 million over 10 years. But a real legacy here at the end of the 10 years of the funding isn't just that we've got new shiny things, that we've got a way that people feel like their community is better, but that actually members of the community have been supported to take an even greater leadership role, that they've been supported to come together as a community, and that as a consequence, Boscombe West feels like there's even more of a sense of belonging. We know that real change happens when communities actually lead, when they're put in the driving seat, because communities know their areas best. And so we want to make sure that people do feel empowered, but also that any investment that's made isn't just done in the short term, but is actually done in the long term and leaves a real legacy. So for Pride in Place, stronger communities need two things. They need the funding, of course, but they also need that critical leadership. And this is also a response to the Towns Fund under the previous government, a learning that it's really important that you build leadership within communities, you engage with communities as leaders in their own right, and as a consequence, they are partners, they are decision takers. Things aren't done to them or felt to be done to them, as has been the experience up and down the country. Next slide, please. So what could the Pride in Place funding support in any of those 400 neighbourhoods? Each neighbourhood gets up to £20 million to invest in priorities. So this could be improving high streets and tackling empty shops. It could be about the creating and enhancing of parks, play areas or green spaces. It's about supporting community sports and activities, protecting pubs, libraries and community centres. It could be about helping people to feel safer through measures that address antisocial behaviour, be it CCTV or designing out crime improvements. It could be about improved leisure facilities. It could be about supporting jobs, skills and training. Really, there is very few limitation on that list of things that people may choose in our own area to put forward. And I think as we get going, we're going to be looking at where Pride in Place has been put into place already and where some of that funding is being spent so that we can learn from those places, but also spend the money even more efficiently as a result. Next slide, please. So how it works is that each neighbourhood gets £20 million, but it's not for the town hall or for the MP to decide. It is very much about putting the community in charge. So a local neighbourhood board is selected. The board sets the priorities, and it sets only after engaging intensively with the communities that are served by Pride in Place. And because it's not about short-term solutions, a 10-year plan is developed, which sets aside what the investment ought to be over that period. This is to make sure that projects actually get delivered on time and over that time. And it's to make sure that as the 10 years go by, communities are always learning. They're always working out how they can make decisions even better, how they can make investments even more effectively. Next slide, please. The neighbourhood board has a number of roles on it. So if you go back one slide, please. Thank you. One of some of the people who will be on that will be myself as the Member of Parliament. It's worth saying in BCP that there are two other areas that are getting £20 million apiece, Hamworthy and West Howe, and the Members of Parliament for Bournemouth West and for Poole will be on their boards too. It's about local residents and local businesses. It's about community groups and faith groups, about local leaders and campaigners. And because a really strong theme that was coming through in my visits to schools over the last 2 years is a sense from younger people that they aren't quite deemed as important or in their views or their voices they raise as other demographics. We're reserving 3 spots on the board for people aged between 16 and 21. So if there's anyone, I like the applause for that. I hope that was somebody who might apply because they're aged 16 to 21. But if there isn't somebody on the call who meets that criteria, please do send information about the Pride in Place opportunity to those people. Next slide, please. So there are 2 roles on the board. There's the chair role, the independent chair role, and then there's the board member role, also an independent board member role. The chair of the board has a particular leadership role. The main thing that they need is the deepest love of Boscombe West. Training is going to be required. Experience of managing a board or leading is not necessary because we will provide you with the support that you need at the pace you need in the ways that you need. It's about listening to you, taking the steer from you, and making sure that we support you to be the leader in your community. The role of the chair is going to be quite similar to what I imagine you are already, which is that because you love Boscombe, you'll champion the area. You'll say to naysayers, no, Boscombe is on the up. We think it's brilliant. It's going to be even better. And this is how. Because you care about Boscombe and you'll be working probably alongside neighbours or knowing people locally, it's about providing leadership and coordination and corralling. As you're a member of the community, you'll realise just how important it is that the community voice is central. And you'll be focused on that long-term sense of what Boscombe's change could look like, rather than thinking about what's the quick fix, what's the sort of short term here. Next slide, please. And the board is going to be responsible for making that long-term regeneration plan, the vision for what 10 years of investment looks like. It's about rooting the investment and decisions in local priorities, so engaging and finding out what people want. It's also about trying to bring extra money in because 20 million from the government is great, but imagine if that could be 30, 40 million pounds because, and this is just to give one example, if the board decides it's going to invest £1 million or £2 million in reopening a theatre, perhaps it could leverage in extra money from the National Lottery or from a local finance hub or institution. And as I say, no prior experience is needed, just love of Boscombe because we'll provide all the training that you need. Next slide, please. The 10-year vision that I was talking about, it sounds big, it sounds potentially even daunting and scary, but don't feel daunted. It's literally just getting around a table, saying what you love about Boscombe, spotting the areas of improvement, thinking about what a bit of top up of money could do to make the area even better, and just working together to come up with solutions. It doesn't all rest on your shoulders as a board member or as a chair. It's about working together. The needs of the investment will change as time goes by, so it won't be a fixed plan at the outset. You don't have to remain for the entirety of the 10 years. Don't worry, it shouldn't feel like an enormous commitment. You hopefully will stay for a few years, maybe up to 10, but it's all about bringing in the experience and expertise you've got for as long as you can share it. Next slide, please. And ultimately, when we're asking ourselves what would success look like in Boscombe, my hope is that in 10 years' time, in 2036, 2037, people in Boscombe feel like we've got more spaces together where we can be together as a community. That by spending time together as a community, we've got a greater belonging to each other, but also to Boscombe. that Boscombe feels like a safer place and that it's always on the up, that there's pride in the community and that the high street is thriving like never before, that younger people and children have more opportunities and that they're better and more suited to the needs that they have than ever before. That if you were to go and ask 10 people on the street, they would say, yeah, they feel so much prouder of Boscombe over the time that's gone by. And ultimately, that residents feel like they're in the decision-making spots, that they're in the charge of the decisions that are being taken. Next slide, please. Now, this is not for me to decide what the money gets spent on. I want to be really clear about that. I have a voice, but not the deciding voice. But because I'm trying to encourage you to think about being on the board, I wanted to set out what we're already hearing from people who are in touch. We're really engaged and visible and accessible as an office. And so when we shared the news of the £20 million, the beautiful thing about that was that people rushed to tell us what they wanted to invest. And because there's no shortage of good ideas, the board, whoever goes onto it, they're going to have so much potential to choose between. There's a real desire for more pitches for young grassroots football teams. There's a desire for more playgrounds for kiddies to play safely, combined with youth clubs. Kings Park Nursery is a much loved community asset that people really like the idea of bringing back into wider public use, but with a clear sense of strategy behind it, working with the two organisations, the fantastic organisations on the ground there. There's desire to see the Shelley Theatre closed for 6 or so years, brought into wider community use. Now, that could, of course, happen through it being in private hands. It might be that the board want to try and have a role there, just stressing that is a privately owned place. It could be that the high street, which will already see greenery stretching from Boscombe over to McDonald's in a few short months, becomes even more enhanced with public sculptures or with playgrounds or with street art, or the list goes on. Boscombe Pier feels like a place that comes up quite a lot. It's a beautiful pier. We as coastal PLPs talk a lot about how to bring piers back into use. It could be about investing in the arts, as I said, and it could be about making Boscombe feel safer. Next slide, please. So we're coming to the close of this section before I hand over to Lizzie. The information that's in these slides, don't worry, we'll circulate it after the call, but it's just to give you a sense of what the timetable looks like. So if you want to apply for chair, you've got time. The deadline is midday on the 10th of July in a few days. And then if you don't hear anything back as an auto reply, don't worry. You will be contacted and you'll be able to have further discussions about the role. The selection process then begins, and there'll be interviews for the role of chair between the 20th of July to the 24th of July. And the decision on who will be the independent chair is taken jointly by me and my office and the local authority and senior officers. To apply to be an independent chair, there's a short application form for you to download and then to send it to BCP Council's email address that you see there. And we'll, as I say, send all the information about where to download things. Next slide, please. And then for the board, applications for the board must be submitted by the 31st of July, so you've got a bit more time. The chair leads the recruitment of the board, but we wanted to save time by encouraging people to apply at the same time as the chair role. And then the chair is able to look through the applications and working collaboratively think about who should be selected to go onto the board. And then the process for selecting will take place in early August, between the 10th and the 21st of August. That's a simple process involving expression of interest, and you'll find more on the website. We are coming to the close here, so we've got 2 slides left. Next slide, please, David. If you want to find out more about the board and you want to have your say on any of the social media comments about the board, please do on the social media channels there. And then the next slide is wrongly placed because we're going to go to Lizzie, but you will, I want to assure you, have an opportunity to ask questions at the end, and David will call on you. If you could just, in order to get as many people in as possible, keep your questions really concise, and then we'll give you the best possible answer that we can. But if we can't get you the answer in the call, we'll obviously make sure that we do on email. Dave, are you okay to take down the PowerPoint?
Yeah. Tom, can I just jump in there for a second? For everybody on the call currently, if you click on the Q&A tab at the top, you'll actually be able to put your question in there for us. So please, select the Q&A button. It should be at the top of the screen, and then pop your question in there for us. But yeah, Tom, I'll take that down now.
Thank you. And without further ado, and with very great pleasure, I'm going to hand over to Lizzi Collinge, the Labour MP for Morecambe and Lunesdale, to give us a taste of what's happening in her constituency and show us how Boscombe West could be doing things.
Yeah,
Over
thanks,
to you.
Tom. Thank you. So I'm from Morecambe and Lunesdale, and the area covered by Pride in Place is called Morecambe West End. So it's a section of Morecambe which is right on the coast. In some ways we have quite similar seats, in some ways not. I mean, we don't have any piers left. We have one little stone jetty, and I feel it's very sad that we don't have any piers left. But there is a really strong group of coastal Labour MPs who are all working together to make sure we get the best for our area. And I have to say, Tom's been really quick off the mark on this Pride in Place stuff. So the scheme for Morecambe was actually announced quite a lot beforehand, before you guys was. And you know, Tom's really grabbed it with both hands. So I'm really excited to see what you all decide to do in Boscombe West. So the way that we've done it in Morecambe is we have actually had the board and staff are being hosted by our local citizens advice board. So our council got a great relationship with my council, and they agreed that whilst they are the accountable body, this programme is not about the council spending money. This is about the community having control. And something that we thought was really important in that was to have that distance from the council. So our Citizens Advice Bureau are hosting staff, they are hosting websites, they are being paid for their time, but only at cost. And they've supported us with administration. So very early days, it was me in my office doing all the heavy lifting, and that's quite hard work. You know, MP's offices don't really have a lot of spare capacity. So the CAB came in quite quickly to help with administration, and we've recruited brilliant chair Helen Bingley and brilliant board members, and I actually wish that we'd done something more like this. I did have an open day in the community where everyone in the area was invited by letter, but I think doing it online like this makes it much more accessible. So I think this is a wonderful thing that you're doing here. So we've got a chair and board members made up from local community, but it became clear to us quite quickly that there were more people who we could make use of than we could actually fit on a board. So we actually also have an expert panel that the board can go into, can dip into for certain sector expertise, and can ask for support as we go forward on specific things. We have also run plans by them. So our plan for engaging with the community, we've run past this expert panel as well. And we had a mix of people we invited to interview. So people who myself and the local authority and the chair thought, you know, we really wanted them involved. So we invited them to interview, but they still had to be interviewed. And an open call for recruitment like you're doing here, Tom, where we wanted the widest group of people possible to apply to be on the board. You know, the board will never fit all the people on who want to apply. So I would emphasise that even if you don't end up on the board or being the chair, please stay involved, because having that wide range of voices is really, really important. The board cannot do this by themselves. So I started as early as I possibly could, through my office, engaging people in Morecambe West End. So we sent a letter out to all the residents, inviting them to come along to a church hall. And this was before the programme had really matured. You know, the government did the thing of making an announcement, but the guidance wasn't already in place. But I, like Tom, wanted to move quickly. So we just get on with it. And I think that's the real lesson here, is just get on with it. Let the government catch up if they need to. And so what I also did was made sure that all the Facebook and email comments that I'd already had were collated and put in a spreadsheet. So even if, you know, be reassured that whatever comments you've made so far to Tom's office or wherever, that will be collected and that will form part of the data. And I think for me, we're hopeful we can get some quick wins out of that early data. I don't really know what your timeline is. I mean, my timeline is we have to submit a report to government. The board has to submit a report to government by November, which actually doesn't leave an awful lot of time for really deep engagement. So we're very clear this is a first step and a first report, and we will continue engaging with the community, being driven by the community. You know, all my board members either live or work in the West End of Morecambe. So this is what they call like an iterative process. It will keep going. So I think what's worked really well so far is we have had loads of people just put their hands up and say, we want to help. And equally, those people have been really patient when we've gone, that's brilliant, but we just need to do this first. So, you know, if there is a gap or a waiting period, just be assured that Tom and other people will be working furiously behind the scenes, because you've no idea, even as a former project management manager, I sort of forgotten just how many steps there are to get to the point of being able to write that report, and even to the point of being able to engage properly with the community. So there's gonna be a lot of paddling underneath the water, I think. But it's worked really well for us having the team hosted within Citizens Advice. So Citizens Advice already provide payroll services and other things to other third sector organisations. And so even though the Pride in Place Board is separate from the Citizens Advice, is not part of its structures, I think it's also makes really clear to people that this isn't about the council spending the money. This is about this independent board being in charge. And I think that's really important, that it's not only true, but that people can see that it's true as well. And I think, you know, the way we've done it is we have recruited staff. You can't do a 10-year programme and spend 20 million quid without recruiting a few staff. It's not possible. Board members and the chair are not there to do the operational stuff. They're there to provide the strategy, to provide the direction. But the board and chair shouldn't be the ones doing all the admin, you know, so you do need staff for that. We eventually are going to have 3 members of staff. Currently, we've got 2. And I think the fact that they're technically employed by the Citizens Advice Bureau, but actually employed by the Pride in Place Board, is really important and gives us a bit more freedom to recruit the right people, to make sure they've got really strong links with Morecambe's West End, and that instead of seconding staff, it sort of makes it a bit clearer. And also, we're going to have local government reorganisation in our area, so that's another barrier that we didn't want to have to get over. So I think that's worked really well. I think in terms of lessons, Tom asked me, you know, for a few things, you know, what have I learned from the early stages? I do think having that clarity about who does what is really, really important. So you avoid duplication, but also you avoid difficult conversations down the road. You know, you're really, really clear from the beginning who is doing what. You know, I understand that the council is the accountable body, so sometimes they might worry a bit about, like, they're not used to not having control over things, right? If they're the accountable body, but this is a new approach by government, and the minister and the government have been very clear that this is about the community and the independent board making decisions. This is not about the council. So I think it's good. Don't wait for permission. And, you know, I know Tom isn't waiting for permission. He's just getting stuff done. I think that's really important. There's guidance that's quite clear, but also quite flexible. So, you know, just getting on and do it. And I think the big lesson is really to leave yourself enough time as board members, as chair, to do that proper community engagement, to plan it really well. And again, I don't know your timelines, but that's the important bit. You know, the really important bit is that this plan is informed by the community. That really, really matters. And I would say to you all, I think it's brilliant that you're here tonight. Make sure that everyone that you know, everyone in your family, everyone in the area gets hooked up either with Tom on his social media or whatever channels you can to get the information. Because even if you go away from this meeting and go, well, I don't think I've got the capacity to be the chair or board member, it's really important that you stay involved. So do, you know, make sure you keep in touch with Tom, make sure you're part of that ongoing conversation, because, you know, it really, really does matter. Like I said, I've kept literally every single email about this, and the key points have been put in a spreadsheet. Every single Facebook comment, the key points have been put in a spreadsheet. So that will feed in to the plan. And I think, read that guidance, be really clear about what the fund is for and what isn't for. And I think the thing that really excited me about this wasn't that it was 20 million quid, it's that it was 10 years, because that allows you to plan, and the money is allocated in that sense to allow you to plan. Yes, you might be able to get some quick wins that everyone agrees on, but don't be afraid to take the time to learn what the community wants and plan strategically for that 10 years. Don't panic and fling money out the door, because I think it's really important. And I think I wish I'd realised early on just quite how long it would take to set up the board and get staff on board, because like I say, the really important bit is community engagement. So please do be part of this process. Tom's being a leader in your local community, but as you said, he's not in charge of this money. It's the neighbourhood board and you who are going to be in charge. But it's good to know that you've got a champion. And we've got a whole group of MPs who are in touch with each other, who are learning from each other. So that means, there's great learning going on across the country and it is being shared. In some ways, I'm sort of envious that you started a little bit later, because you guys get to learn from the mistakes we've made as an early going group. But I'm really excited because I think it's about the government putting power back in your hands, and that's what makes it so exciting.
Amazing. Brilliant. In which case, David, are you ready to go into questions?
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Tom. So I'm going to just remind everybody, the Q&A section should be at the top of your screen. So just pop your question there. I've got quite a few coming in. I'm going to divide it into two themes. So first theme is about the board itself, Tom. So first question is, how many people will there be on the board?
So how many people are on Morecambe's? Because they vary from place to place.
Yeah, so I think we've got 12 or 13 off the top of my head, and we felt that was as big as we could go while still making it a sensible decision making. We do have substitution rules, so people can substitute, and we do have rules around quoracy, so how many people have to be there to make a decision. But it's a balancing act, and it can be different in different areas. Some areas might feel that they want more people on to get that breadth of experience. I said before about how we've done it slightly different, to have an expert reference panel that we can draw in. So I think it really depends what works for your area.
And how many people do you have in your expert reference panel?
So currently we're on about 20, but we're hoping to grow that. And what we've done is, we've run the community engagement plan by then, but the idea is the board thinks, right, we've got some specific things that the community have raised. We're going to pull in people from the panel, from the board, and work that problem together.
Brilliant. So it does vary from place to place. It is typically between 12 and 15, isn't it?
Yeah.
But ultimately, it would be up for the chair to take that decision, because they're the ones who are the leader of the board and the leader in their community on this. Next question.
Thanks for that, Jeanette. So Sally's asking what sort of time commitment is involved in the different roles taken. Liz's experience, what are you seeing? What does that look like from your perspective?
So from my perspective, at the beginning, it's more than it will be going ahead. It depends on how you set it up and how chair. So I have a chair who wants to be very involved. So she's doing about a day a week, but she's retired and she wants to do that. She wants to get her hands dirty. And I think initially you're going to have to do more whilst you're getting everything set up. But we are getting to the stage now where the chair is working with the board to make decisions and lead strategy rather than doing the day-to-day stuff. And I think it depends how much you can give. Tom might have more of an idea in your area.
Yeah, well, and also, how regularly do you meet?
So board meets once a month initially. We are looking at moving that to once a quarter once we're up and running, but in the first year at least, we're going to be once a month. And we have had a couple of additional meetings on top of that. So the community engagement plan, the very first draft was done with me and the chair, and then it went through the board and the expert panel, and it changed because of that. So yeah, there will be additional meetings, and the way we've done it is we have board members who are a lead for a certain area.
Oh, cool.
So someone took health as a project, and she's just gone off and done loads of stuff. You know, there are other ones, other lead members who are not doing as much. And so I think it depends on what works for you, but it is a serious commitment. I mean, you do have to be willing to commit some time to it. But yeah, that's helpful.
I think that is helpful. And I think also because the chair is particularly charged with looking at engagement, it's really important that they're in community space. I mean, they'll be from the community and they'll be selected partly because they love the area and they know the area so well. So it should feel for them like just part of their everyday life, really, but they're doing it in a kind of more formalized role as the chair. But the goal really is to be out there and visible and engaging local people's views. The role that you're describing at your Citizen Advice Bureau, the project manager role, wherever that goes within Boscombe, whether it is, remaining with the council or whether it goes to a third party organisation, that is a critical role for supporting the chair and the board so that they are, like Lizzie was saying, focusing entirely on strategy. Because the last thing that you want is somebody to apply to be chair and then they're preparing their own agendas and they're minuting their own meetings and sitting up until 11 p.m. over the laptop just to make sure that everything is in order. That's not what we want people to come in and do. We don't want unpaid admin. That's rude and unfair. What we want is people who have got that strategy and that real deep knowledge of an area.
Is it worth me talking about the staffing
Yeah,
at
definitely.
this stage? So the staffing structure went through a few different iterations, talking with different people. But again, we were really clear that the board and the chair need to be able to focus on what's important and not be managing an inbox of, thousands of emails or writing agendas or what have you. So we have a Pride in Place manager who has started and she takes overall responsibility for programme delivery. We also have starting in August, a bit later than planned for health reasons, a community engagement and research lead. So their job is making sure that the community voice is at the heart of it all the time. And between her and the manager doing the doing, so, organising things, talking to people. And again, the point is to be out in the community. So we've even got a little Pride in Place bike. So we have an office in the heart of the community. We have a little Pride in Place cargo bike come in, so we can go to local events and stuff and be visible. And we are also taking on a part-time admin person, so that they can do the paperwork, make sure everything's on track. I genuinely think that's probably the minimum you need. So this is a £20 million programme over 10 years. The budget for that, because the funding does include the budget for that. The budget for that is in single figures as a percentage of the total fund. I can't remember off the top of my head. I want to say 6 or 7%, but I'd have to check that. But certainly having run projects and businesses before, it's less than you'd normally spend on a programme or on a budget of this size. And I think that reflects that the community are putting a lot into it and the unpaid board and chair are putting a lot into it. But I would emphasise you really do need that staff support or else it would fall apart.
Yeah, and I think just before we go into another question, I think there's an interesting point as we develop about how we bring in local community organisations. So I'm not presuming to speak for them or to decide what they will do, but I used to run mental health and domestic abuse services. I know that in that role, whenever there was any funding or there was any project underway where I had a shared goal with them, I would try and work with them in order to better achieve my own goals and the kind of society that we want to live in. And frankly, this money would not have come about but for the support that Bournemouth Food Bank and YMCA and Citizens Advice Bureau and Poverty Truth Commission gave to me in providing not just people's lived experience, but also statistics. And they're just some examples of local organisations that I'm sure will want to and will be more involved, whether it's by having people who work there on the board itself after a selection process, perhaps, or whether it's because they want to be involved in that more informal way.
Yeah.
So there's lots of resource that's potentially going to be coming in. Next question.
Perfect. So from Dominic, how long do you sit on the board for? Is it the full 10 years or do they change every year or two?
So it's up to you. I think we started with a minimum term of 2 years. I mean, obviously life happens you know, sometimes it will happen. And so I think the answer is as long as you want, really. I think if you think you'll only be able to do it for 6 months, I probably wouldn't apply because you'd want a bit longer than that. But yeah, and we, you know, we thought really carefully about this. We've put in place mechanisms for replacing the chair if God forbid anything, you know, went wrong. We've put in place mechanisms to try and think of every possible outcome. But I think, you know, you're signing up for the medium term, I think is probably how I would put it.
Brilliant.
Perfect. Thanks. One from Andrew is actually, if you work for a local charity in the third sector, does this preclude you from sitting on the board?
So the way that we've done it is we have a conflict of interest regimen. So actually, the chief exec of Citizens Advice is our vice chair, and that decision was made before Citizens Advice became the partner. So I don't think it precludes you. I think it would really, you would have to be very certain that you could set aside your own interest in that organisation. And also, if there are any decisions that would involve your organisation, either about award of funds or being involved, then you just sit back from that decision. And so we've put processes in place to make sure that that's there. So we all have to declare our interests, you know, in the same way that me and Tom do as parliamentarians. We have to declare every interest that we have. Mine's quite short. I know yours. Minuscule, yeah. But so, for example, the vice chair declares that she is the chief exec of the Citizens Advice. She also declares she's a trustee of a certain charity fund, and that's how it's managed.
And, you know, again, not determining what's going to happen, but I would imagine the board running like a charity board of trustees would. And so the experience I had in running services was that when your papers were circulated ahead of time, they were, you know, 7 to 10 days ahead of the meeting happening. So members of the board could look at the papers, prepare, but also see if there was a potential conflict.
Yeah.
So they could flag it ahead of time.
Yeah.
And then at the start of every meeting, you have a register of interests where, you know, first of all, you ask you ask board members whether they think they've got a conflict of interest. And then if they do, and it's not been flagged ahead of time, you can think about how you minimize or mitigate against that. Maybe you step out of the room for that agenda item. Or, you know, just making sure that everything is transparent, everything's documented, that you feel comfortable. And it's not just you making that decision. It's not the chair making the decision only. It's all of the board around you. So you've got lots of voices, lots of experiences who will just say if they think there's a conflict. And if there's a conflict, it will probably be just for one agenda item rather than the entirety of the thing. And ultimately, I'd say if you were to apply and you do get shortlisted and you do get interviewed, that could be the place where you have this discussion.
Fantastic.
Next question.
Just talking about transparency, there's a couple of comments about how truly independent the board is going to be. So what sort of influence does the local authority or the statutory services have on the board? Is it truly driven by the local community?
So there are certain things that the local authority has to sign off on as the accountable body. So the appointment of chair, they do have to sign off on that. But that doesn't mean that they're actually making the decision. So I don't know who's going to be on the interview panel for yours. But certainly in my experience, the council has not in any way tried to override or affect the decisions on who to appoint or decisions to make. So on the board, the local authority has one vote, but it's one vote out of many. And it does not on the board have the power to override or veto anything. The only time the local authority could step in is if the board were doing something that was not legal, that was outside of legal financial guidance. But at that point, they would be getting the ministry involved anyway. So yes, there is some influence from the local authority in terms of having to sign off who the chair is, but it's very much designed to not be led or overly influenced by the local authority, because the government was very, very mindful of that. And the minister has written to local authorities to make that clear again recently.
Brilliant. Right. Fantastic. Got a couple of questions around the training. So how long will training take? When will this carried out? What type of training? Two separate people asking.
So I think that's probably up to local ones. We were very lucky. We had a local woman who had a lot of board experience. And so the training has been fairly minimal the training needs have been fairly minimal. We also, though, have brought in outside parties when someone on the board didn't have the requisite skills, or the chair didn't have the requisite skills. So we have paid for facilitators for the first couple of meetings just while we get on our feet, because they have the professional skills to get them there. So I think we've been very lucky where we have identified training needs. We've got, let's take an example. We have a young woman on our board who has never sat in formal meetings before. She's never had a job where she's need to have agendas or anything like that. And so actually the vice chair has worked with her to go like, this is what this means. This is how an agenda works. This is the sort of expected way of things operating, but also emphasizing that her voice is just as valid as the chair's. So I think it depends on the individual appointed, and it depends on the needs. So I would say, even if you've never run a board before, that's not a reason not to apply. Even if my first office job, I was 30 when I had my first office job. So the first time I walked into a meeting with an agenda, I was like, I don't really know what's going on here. Don't worry about that. That will be taken through. So even if you think it's really basic, if that's identified as a need, then it should be met.
Yeah, and I think I completely agree with all of that. And I think I'd start from a place of, don't find reasons to rule yourself out.
Yeah.
Find reasons to rule yourself in. The most important thing is that you really love the place, that you care about its future, and that you're excited by the opportunity to make this investment work. So the board is there for you to just get what you need. We can support you in terms of how to participate in, a board meeting, how to prepare for it, how to sort of read your agenda or whatever it is. We can support you, if it gets to budget setting around, how do you read a budget? But my experience of running that charity was that the trustees who were the most impactful were people with lived experience, who, came because they had that experience. That was the thing that was most useful. And then everything else that they said that they needed around that, we were led by them. We put in place what they needed in the way they needed it. And the last thing I'd say is that because we are doing something quite innovative in Boscombe West with the reservation of 3 spots for young people, we are going to be starting straight away from the assumption that we need to listen and learn about what we provide. I certainly, I'm not best placed to say to a 16 to 21-year-olds what training package they need. They need to be telling us. So we're already starting with that listening ear. Next slide. Sorry. Next question.
That's a long day. So I'll move on to some questions that are probably more specific to Boscombe West here, Tom. So in regards to Kings Park, a couple of people have mentioned, how does Kings Park work? Because it's not currently in the boundary for Boscombe West, and also a few people have drawn comparisons with the Towns Fund and how that didn't benefit them, and so perhaps give a bit of clarity. What's the difference between the Towns Fund and the Pride in Place? Why?
Yeah, so well, first of all, with Kings Park, you're right. It's outside of the neighbourhood area. So too is Shelley Theatre and Shelley Park, and so too Boscombe Overcliff Gardens, and some of the bits north of the MSO of the neighbourhood area, which include bits of Springbourne, which conversations that me and David have had with the council, we're quite keen to expand the boundaries. We brought a leader down from the Ministry of Housing, Community and Local Government to walk around, and we probably spent more time in Kings Park than anywhere else, actually. And she clearly took away a real sense of the ambition that we have locally, but also a love for the place. So we're going to make, a request for the expansion of the boundaries. And ultimately, that's just to provide the board with more options. We're not determining that the spend has to be there. We just don't want the board to miss an opportunity to have that area. But even if for some reason that we can't anticipate, we can't get the expansion, there are still Pride in Place areas who are investing money outside of their neighbourhood area. The key sort of condition around expanding the neighbourhood boundaries is that you don't take on a larger population, a denser population, and that you don't take on a different demographic profile. But if we're expanding into Kings Park, we're not going to be taking on a population density. So we should be fine. In terms of the difference between the Towns Fund and the Pride in Place Fund, I think where I've sat in the Towns Fund board for nearly 2 years, I think where I'd say the difference is that the Pride in Place Fund will start with a chair from the community, whereas that role has just been filled in the last few months excellently by Harry from Chaplains. It's also about really embedding from the beginning the principles of working with each other and within the community, as opposed to anything else. And it's also, I think, really important that the engagement is done at the outset, but that isn't the end of the kind of engagement process. I think people want to know that the money being spent is on their priorities, that they're consulted and engaged from the beginning and all the way through, that they feel communicated with all the way through, which is why we're having this webinar. It's why we're so visible on our social media channels. It's, we're just trying to make sure that people feel like they can get involved and lead this. I shouldn't be leading this. The council shouldn't be leading this. We won't be. It's about me having secured the funding for you to take charge, and that's going to be the major difference with the town's fund.
And I think as well, if I can add to that, in terms of approach from the government, it is totally different to the old towns fund. It is totally different. And I think that communication is really key. And that's what I've tried to do with my constituents. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges for the board going forward, is making people feel that they've been heard, because it's not every idea that comes forward is going to get done by the board. That's just true, because there's not endless money. There's quite a lot of money, but it's not endless money. And so I think understanding where those priorities have come from in the community and why decisions have been made is really important. So even if the one specific thing that you really wish the money gets used for doesn't happen, you can have confidence and trust that actually everything's been looked at in the round and decisions have been made based on what the community is saying.
Yeah, and I think just to close on this bit, I'm really very, very strongly of the view that communications after the recruitment of a chair are from the chair. They are only from the chair. The chair is in charge of what communications go out on what platforms, and they are their own voice, because that's how you build the trust. I totally get that there'll be some people who feel a little bit concerned about engaging with the Pride in Place project because of their perception or their experience of Towns Fund. That is, I think that's something I recognise. I think, the council too would be open about that, from the conversations that I've had with a senior officer. And I guess what I'd say is that, David and I work really closely with a particular senior officer at BCP Council, and I want to be honest about where I think the council does good things and where it doesn't do good things. But this particular officer, I think, is superb. Has done a really good job of Pride in Place so far. And I'm saying that, as somebody who wants this to succeed, who has sometimes had reason to criticise the council, I think we're all on the same page about making this work. So I don't want you to feel in any way disheartened about engaging with this process. And ultimately, it will be you. It will be in your hands. The council and me as the MP, we're irrelevant after a certain point. It's all over to you.
Perfect. Apologies, I've just seen there's been a lot of comments under my first Q&A that I put up there as an example. So I just want to say to Elizabeth, really good insights. Elizabeth has shared her concerns about what's happening locally in terms of vape shops and kind of the way the high street's going. And these are all great observations. And I think what we've started to do, just building on what Lizzie said, is that we are capturing those things. And these are great things to share with when that board sets up, Elizabeth. So going back to what Tom said right at the start, whether you want to be part of the board or want to be part of the solution, I guess, in terms of providing feedback, these observations we'll capture and we'll definitely send on to the board. So thank you for that. Got a really good question from Rosa. So she's asking about what engagement activities, Lizzie, you took in your constituency, and what results did you get from them, and did it affect any final decisions that you've made so far?
Just before I go to Lizzie, two quick things, which are that we're going to have to head off in about 5 minutes. But the second thing is, and I want to address this really up front, because somebody's asked, you're going to spend it outside of Boscombe. Totally get that concern, if that's a concern you have. But whenever I go door knocking in Boscombe, whenever I meet anybody in Boscombe, my office is on the high street, I'm in Boscombe all the time. the number one thing that people in Boscombe talk about is Kings Park when they're talking about a community space. So even though it is technically over a boundary, it is the green space that people in Boscombe feel most passionate about improving. And it's not that we're going to spend the money outside of Boscombe in that area. Actually, it's up to the people who are on the board from Boscombe to make that decision. So I just wanted to really address any sort of concern that there may be there.
In terms of engagement, we're right at the beginning really of our full engagement plan. So everyone in the area did get a letter, and I did do a drop in person and an invitation to come along. Our community engagement plan basically has two strands. A survey, both paper and digital, and then face-to-face engagement, right? So the survey's gone live. If you Google Morecambe West End Pride in Place survey, you might be able to have a look at it, and I think you can fill it in without actually submitting it. Please don't submit it if you're not from Morecambe West End, but you can have a look at some of the questions we're asking. But the really, and that's going to be, like I said, digitally pushed out, but also on paper, so that people can have, people who aren't online, who don't have Facebook or whatever, and will still be able to do that. So in local shops, local community centres, literally everywhere it's going to be. And we do have an office opening up in the centre of the area as well. And then face-to-face stuff, we're really keen that it's not the usual suspects. So we're going to try and go to where people are. So existing groups, existing clubs, and we're also going to try different approaches. So something that I know they did in, I think, Bradford, was they did a gaming session for young people. So they actually bought in this truck with amazing video games in, got loads of young people along, and just like while they were there, did a survey with them. We're going to do kind of art sessions and stuff like that. So but we are right at the beginning of that. We've only just written our plan and had it approved by the board. And I think as we go through it, we'll learn what works and what doesn't. And keep going. Also, the local schools have done a brilliant job. The heads at the local schools have offered to do sessions with them. So we've also done school gates, and summer fairs and stuff like that. So we're basically just trying to get to wherever people already are. I was on a stall at a local festival recently doing it. So yeah, going to where people are and asking the question.
Brilliant. Should we take one last question?
It's more of an observation, but I suppose it is a question. It's asking about whether or not Pride in Place are going to balance up green spaces. Is this going to take into equal consideration green spaces and green initiatives, or is this purely a growth of a high street and existing systems?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, it's what the community says they want. This isn't just about high streets. This isn't just about green spaces. This isn't just about climate. This isn't just about health. This isn't just about safety. Isn't just about cleanliness. This is about the whole community, and different communities will have different priorities. I mean, we're getting really strongly back affordable, decent housing as a really key concern. Cleanliness is a really strong concern. Feelings of safety is a really strong concern, but also places for people to gather and play. And health is a big interest for me. Health is coming through strongly, both from the community and from data about what the challenges are in our areas. And we know that green spaces are really good for your health. We know that tackling climate change is really good for your health. So it's what the community says. It's not at all narrow. And in fact, the government guidance, when I first saw it, it said, oh, there's a list of approved interventions. And I got very huffy and said, what do you mean a list of approved interventions? And then I read it, and it's like hundreds of pages long. It's just to have some boundaries. So if you try and do something that's entirely mad, there is some limit, but it's not just about one thing.
Brilliant. Excellent. In which case, I think we'll draw it to a close there. Thank you very much for joining the call. I hope you found that useful. Thank you to Lizzie for joining the call and sharing your experiences from Morecambe and Lonsdale. And please do think about applying for the chair role. And if you're slightly put off from applying for the chair role, which you have no reason to be, then do please consider applying for the independent board role. We will make sure that we circulate the information to everybody who RSVP'd about the timeline and about the process, and we'll make sure as a consequence that you're able to apply if you want to. But thank you again, and hopefully see you all very soon. Thanks.